I've been battling these gophers. This is the only lettuce I've got out of that whole bed that they didn't eat. Between the gophers and the squirrels, I ended up getting ground squirrels. And as you can see, they're just digging holes everywhere. It's such a mess in this garden. As you can see, I've got holes from these squirrels all along my fence. And I've been battling them now all year long. They have just done a number on my yard. There's holes in this garden area everywhere, in all the beds, everything. I have a squirrelinator and I do catch them, but as soon as I catch them, more come. More holes. This looks like a fresh hole. Look at that. So today we're going to be rehoming them. So I have a friend here who's digging out all the dirt, and we're going to be putting down some wire mesh. This is part of what you have to do as an organic gardener, and it's time to get rid of our ground squirrels. This is the wire mesh that we're going to be stapling to the bottom of the boxes. It's a 1/2 inch hardware cloth, and this we're going to have all along the bottom, and then we're going to secure in between the beds as well. So after my helper got the 6 beds kind of gopher squirrel proofed on the bottom, using that 1/2 inch wire gauge and heavy duty staples. It's the kind you actually screw in, so they're really strong. But I am actually going to be planting out some tomato plants in this bed. I've had it all, I've been working on getting all of the steer manure put in the beds, and you can see when I start to dig a hole to put my tomatoes in, I take a little handful of azomite. It's a rock dust, which I'm holding in my hand right now, and that azomite just helps really provide some additional nourishment, especially to tomato plants. So what I like to do is dig a really deep hole, put about a tablespoon or 2 of the azomite at the bottom of the hole, and then I put a product down called Triple 13. It's a fertilizer, which is like a slow release fertilizer. I put about a tablespoon of that in with the azomite, and then I cover up about 1 inch of soil over both of those before I put my tomato plant in the soil. Here I'm just trying to open this bag. When they sent it to me from Amazon, it was taped up so hard, I mean, you can't even imagine. But this is just a really good product. I use it every year. I never get the, you know how sometimes you'll see people will get that black stuff on the bottom of their tomatoes. It's kind of like a tomato bottom rot. I never get that. My tomatoes are always getting plenty of calcium and plenty of nutrients throughout the soil. And so I put both of those in. I've covered it up. I'm taking out my tomato plants. Now, I made kind of a big mistake this year. I started my tomato plants really early. And so as they started getting bigger, I was looking for all kinds of containers that I could put these larger tomato plants in. These coffee cans did not work at all. They have like a little lip right around the edge. It was so hard to get these tomato plants out of these coffee tins. I will not use those again. But, you know, a week later, these tomato plants look really good. They've been through the rain and some severe wind, and it did just fine. But you can see how big this tomato plant is. Now, I actually trim the bottom leaves of the tomato plant. I don't keep them so that they're touching the soil. I like to have everything pulled away as much as I can. And I just kind of open up those roots a little bit with my glove. I just want them to get into the soil and the nutrients as quickly as possible. And so I cover up the roots with dirt, and then I kind of make a little well around the bottom of the tomato plant. I have kind of a, I don't know, it's just kind of a metal trellis that I have down the middle of my bed to kind of help stabilize my tomato plants in the wind. But I also put a long green stake in there, and as the tomato starts to grow, the tomato plant, I actually stake up my tomatoes and make sure that, because they are indeterminate tomatoes, that they're not going to be falling over, and they really need a place to go vertically. So if you don't know the difference between a determinate and an indeterminate tomato plant, so a determinate tomato plant is a tomato plant that really has like kind of its own little short life. You get tomatoes really quickly, but they get to a certain height and they quit growing height wise. They produce all of their fruit. They're very good. I mean, there's some very good determinate tomato plants, but the indeterminate ones are, you see more of the heirloom type of tomatoes. And what I like is that they just keep growing and growing and growing all summer, and you really get a lot of tomatoes. I mean, you just get so much fruit in your tomato plants. So as you can see, I have a ton of weeds on the bottom of my beds. I have not been able to get out here with this darn knee for like 3.5 months. I haven't really been able to do anything out in the garden. But as you can see, I'm bringing some stakes over from another area of the garden, and I'm going to stake up those tomato plants. Today we're going to be finishing up our last bed that we're going to be working on, and then I'm just going to show you some of the things I do to plant in my garden, and I'm also going to show you just basically how I prep a bed and how I get it ready for planting. Now, I did plant some different things last week. I planted some tomatoes and peppers, and right after I did, of course, it rained and it was very windy. So I've got one of my tomatoes I think I'm going to have to replace, but already I'd say probably 10 of them have doubled in size. So they were happy to get into the ground. So let me show you what I have. So this is my little gardening cart. I always bring this out to the garden when I'm working. It just keeps like any current plants that I want to be planting in the garden up here. I've got my triple 13 fertilizer and my azomite. I am going to be planting some garlic today, my gloves, and then just a couple gardening tools. I always like to make up a list of how I want to have everything laid out in the garden. It just helps me to make sure that I don't forget anything and that I get everything in the garden when I'm kind of getting ready to plant. I already planted 6 trays of tomatoes, peppers, flowers, all kinds of things. So I'm going to take you around and show you what I've done, and then I'm going to show you my last bed that I'm going to work on today, and my goal over the next 2 weeks with the garden floor and my other 2 beds that are already planted. So these are the 5 garden beds that I've already planted, and these tomatoes right here were the size of the ones next to them just a week ago. I planted these last Monday, but I just wanted to show you how I do this. I have everything set up on kind of a little sprinkler system, so once all these are in, it's pretty much just maintaining the weeds and making sure that everything's growing the way that it should. So I basically put 8 to 10 tomato plants per bed, and around the bottom of the plants in all my beds, I always use grass clippings as my mulch. It helps add some nitrogen. I just have to make sure there's no weed products that have been put on the grass in the last couple months, which there haven't. So these are all the tomatoes that I planted last week. They're looking really good. I do have a hydrangea that I planted in here, and a couple of onions right on the corner. And there's some stevia there that I planted. Seems to be doing pretty good in that spot. Just give it a little. Now these are some tomato plants that I planted just a few days ago, and they look really good. They're not real big. I only have 4 of them in this bed, but this is really my pepper bed. I've got 12 pepper plants that I planted. Now these, as soon as they're a little bit bigger, a couple of them I tied with some zip ties, but when they get a little bit bigger, I always tie them to a stake because of the wind. And then I planted 4 of these Tom Thumb lettuces that I had growing in this particular bed. And right along the edge here next to my trellis, I've got pole beans that I've planted in both beds next to each other. In this third bed, I've got some more tomatoes, some dahlias right down the middle, and I've got more pole beans down here next to these trellises. This fourth bed, I've reserved this to most of my flowers. I've got about 10 dahlias. I love dahlias, and I've got those planted all along the back part of the bed. And then I've got about, let's see, 2, 4, 6, I've got about 7 lettuces that I planted down the middle. And then right along here, I planted seeds, and these are going to be where my pumpkins go. And then this area on the side of the trellis, I planted some spaghetti squash. In this 5th bed, I planted some Lisa Craig tomatoes. I'm sorry, Elisa Craig onions. And all the rest of this bed is cucumbers and 2 zucchini plants. Now these are all seeds, so we won't really see anything for, you know, probably a couple of weeks. Since I planted cucumbers here, I've also tried out a new kind of dill that I planted. This is an elephant dill. And I've got one growing in the house in my hydroponics, and these are just beautiful. I just love this dill so far. Now this is the 6th bed that I have that I'm going to be working on, and I'm actually going to film this so you can see how I prep this bed and how I get it ready for my plants. I'm pretty much going to be doing root vegetables in this. This used to be filled with all of my rhubarb, but when we took the dirt out to put the metal netting down on the bottom for the gophers, it got rid of all the rhubarb. But I did notice yesterday one of them looks like it did survive. It wasn't in this spot, but it looks like it did make it. So let me get started on this, and I'll show you how we get this started. So before I get going on that other bed, I did tell you that I had a tomato plant that just didn't fare very well from all the winds. So I saved my tomato plants. I've got about 5 or 6 left just for this reason. And as you can see, it's seen better days. So all I'm going to do is replace this. I want to make sure that I have the best plant in here that I can. Now, I've already put fertilizer in this hole, so I'm not going to add fertilizer to it. All I'm going to do is replace the plant. Now this is a Brandywine black tomato. It's healthy, doing well. All I'm going to do is take it out of this cup and put it right in the hole. There you go. Easy peasy. Okay. All right, that looks really good. I don't want to disturb these onions because they're doing really good as well. All right. That was very easy. Just going to kind of pull this around here. So it kind of goes around the plant. There. Now, a couple of these bottom leaves, I'm actually going to just take them off. I don't want anything real close to the ground. That's perfect. Now, I've got my tomato plant ready to go. All right, I might take that one off as well. There, okay. And that will do really well there. So each one of these beds looks pretty good. There's not a lot of weeds that are in it. So I am going to take out the weeds that I do find, and a couple of these stray onions. I don't want those in there. I've got some others. So I think I'm just going to transplant those with my other onions. Okay, so I've got 3 here growing kind of close together anyway. So we're going to just take those apart carefully, just like this, and go ahead and transplant those. All right, you can see the soil, even without adding anything or amending it, it looks really good. Now what I do is I take a bag of cow manure. I like this black cow. I think it works really good. It's really like a low odor. And then all I do is just spread this all around the bed. And I'm going to use a tool here to kind of mix it all up. And you'll see it's going to work out really good. Now another thing I do at this step is I go through the garden, and as I come across these grubs, I don't know if you can see it real clearly, I throw those away. All I'm going to do is kind of turn the soil over a little bit just to mix in the steer manure. So there's 2 other things that I add to my soil as I'm going through the process of getting everything planted. Now today I'm only going to be doing some garlic over here. So I'm only going to do part of this, but this is azomite. This is a rock dust. Just going to put this right over the top. Now if I'm planting something like tomatoes, I actually dig a hole and put a teaspoon of this in, and then I cover it up with a little bit of dirt with my fertilizer. But this will be enough to get us going today. I'm going to just work it in. This is triple 13 fertilizer. I get this on Amazon every year. I buy this. Just the perfect amount. And I just sprinkle it right on top of the soil. A couple handfuls, maybe a cup for this area. So this is my garlic. This is the bottom where the root is, and this is the top. So all you're going to do is just take it apart like you would a regular piece of garlic. And you're going to plant it with the little triangle part at the top, and the root part goes in the bottom. I'm just going to take some of these apart. Get them ready to plant. Now one of these little packages for 88 cents at Aldi will pretty much supply me garlic for the whole year. So this is just a really great way to do it. Now you can buy it online. I get mine at the grocery store, and I do this every year. It works out just great. I haven't tried the elephant garlic, just this. This is pretty much what I use in the kitchen. And I've made garlic braids for people and all kinds of things for Christmas presents. And it's always kind of a fun thing to do, to grow garlic. And it grows fast. You're going to plant these about 2 or 3 inches away from each other. Keep pests out of your garden. They're not really gophers and, you know, squirrels. They don't really like garlic or mint. All right. So all I do is just kind of make some little rows like this. And then with the correct end pointing up, I just push them right in the soil. I don't dig a hole or anything like that. I just push them in, and I'll show you an up-close photo as soon as I have it done. This paper that's on it, don't worry about getting it all off. It isn't going to affect anything. So maybe, you know, like this. It's fast. It's something that happens really quick. You get a quick result. In a couple months, you're going to have garlic, and it'll work out really good. Just like this. Like that. I always try to make everything as even as I can. I just kind of like when everything grows, if it's growing nice and straight and the rows are kind of aligned. I just like the look of it. Now all you're going to do, I'm going to move the paper just so you can see. So all you're going to do is just lightly cover it up. You don't want it real deep, just really light. Like that. And I always kind of pat it down. It's just habit. I don't know if you really need to, but that's what I do. And that's it. Garlic's planted. So I've got about, I would say probably another couple weeks worth of work out in the garden. I'm going to be filming as I finish up all of the weeding and intermittent planting, everything that I'm doing. And I think what I'm going to do is, I've got some, as you know, probably if you've been following my gardening part of my channel, I've had some real problems last year with squirrels, and that's what led me to put the real 1/4-inch steel mesh with the heavy-duty staples under each of my garden beds. Now, the person that was doing it had an appendectomy. He had an appendicitis attack, and so he wasn't able to finish the last 2 beds. At this point, I'm not sure I'm going to worry about those 2 right now. I have some ideas of how to combat the gophers, but I did buy a product online. Now, they didn't sell it on Amazon. I watched several landscaping videos of people getting rid of ground squirrels and gophers. And this site is called Gopher Goo, G-O-O. Now, I haven't tried it. I did order it, and I'm going to be using it when it comes in the next week or so. It didn't come from Amazon, so I don't know how quickly I'll get it. But I am anxious to try it. It's kind of a powder that you put into the hole, and then you add water, like through a hose for a couple minutes, and the product expands like 300 to 500 times the size of a regular granule. And what I like about it is it's completely organic. It makes kind of a gel that fills the hole for the squirrel or the gopher. It has some fertilizer in it and things like that. But when the gopher or the squirrel tries to go through it, it gets like this oily stuff on their skin or on their hair that they just really don't like. Doesn't hurt them or kill them, but it does make them leave the area. So that's what I've heard from these different landscapers that they use. So we're going to try that. We're going to try to fill in all the holes that are out there. The squirrels have done a lot of damage in one season. It was terrible, terrible. So I'm going to try my best to deal with that more aggressively this year. And like I said, my goal was to put the landscape fabric and the rocks down in between my beds, but with everything that's been going on between my knee surgery and then, my helper having problems of his own, I just haven't been able to get it done. And I needed to get the beds planted. I think it's safe at this point. I may lose a little bit of my harvest, but I'm not going to lose a lot. I'm going to really keep a good eye on it. And so that's what I'm doing right now. Just trying to finish up my gardening. I've got about 5 or 6 tomato plants. I've got a friend over here that lives not too far from me that also loves to garden. So I've got 5 or 6 really good varieties of plants that I think he'll really enjoy. So I'm going to give those to him. And otherwise, I'll be planting out the root seeds in probably the next couple of days. But I'm going to upload this video. I don't know how long it's going to be. I've been filming it for about a month. And so thank you for joining me. Thank you for supporting my channel and watching me in the garden. And I hope that your gardening is going very successfully. And I'll see you next time. If you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing to my channel. Give me a like, a share, or a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.